Once upon a time, a long time ago, in a small village in the countryside, a baby was born to a small family. They didn't have much money, but they were very pleased to hear from a local wise woman that their baby boy had been born under a lucky star. And so they called him the Luck Child, for she said that he might even grow up and marry the king's daughter. Well, everybody was talking about this luck child who might even grow up to marry the king's daughter, when who should come riding through that village in disguise but the king himself. And he heard this talk. A luck child? Where do they live? This boy who might grow up to marry the king's daughter. And he came to the house where the baby lived, and he said, "What a wonderful thing." He didn't let on that actually he didn't like this idea at all of this boy from this poor family in this village to grow up and marry his granddaughter. So he said, "How wonderful to have a luck child. How blessed you are. Maybe I can help you. Maybe I could bring him up in my castle and give him fine clothes," because although they couldn't see that he was the king, they could see that he was well off. And they didn't want to because they loved their baby boy. But in the end, he offered them quite a lot of gold and assured them that he would take every care of their child, who was indeed a luck child, until they agreed. A man in the village made a little box, and inside they put blankets and cushion and soft things, and they made holes in the roof so the baby could breathe when he was lying in his cot. And then they put it together, and they strapped it to the back of the king's horse and waved their baby goodbye. And the king rode slowly and carefully, as though he really cared about the baby, until he was out of sight. And then he rode quite quickly to the nearest river, got off his horse, unstrapped the cradle, and threw the whole thing into the river without a backward glance. Well, the baby didn't even wake up, but floated down the river. It was quite nice in the river, with the water rocking from side to side, and there he lay in his little cradle, soft and warm, maybe even the sun shining on the box to keep him a little warmer. And eventually, the box came to rest in a mill pond, which is the quiet water above a mill. And when they let the water out through the sluice gates, it turns the water wheel, and the water wheel turns the big mill wheels, and that turns the stones that grind the flour. But at that moment, they weren't using it, and the water was staying very still in the mill pond. The miller's boy, who happened to be nearby, saw the box and thought, "Ooh, maybe treasure," and got a long stick and pulled it ashore. Well, it wasn't treasure exactly. It was a beautiful, smiling baby boy who looked up at him and gurgled. So the miller's boy took him to the miller and his wife. Now, the miller and his wife didn't have any children. The miller's boy worked for them, but he wasn't their child. And so they were thrilled. Here was a very bonny baby indeed. And they raised him as their own, and he grew up to be a very fine, good-natured, good-looking, helpful young man of 16. Now, a storm happened somewhere around the time he was 16, and the king, who was riding past this particular mill, got caught in the wind and the rain and the thunder and took refuge at the mill. And there he saw this fine young man and said, "Is this your son?" And they go, "No, he was a foundling. We found him. He came down the river in a box about 16 years ago. What a bit of luck for us. We now have a lovely boy. Aren't we lucky?" Well, the king said, "You are indeed." And again, he was very annoyed. He'd already tried to get rid of this child, who was supposed to grow up and possibly marry the king's daughter. So he said, "I wonder if your lad would run a message for me to the queen. I'd give him 2 gold pieces. And the miller said, "Oh, he'd be glad to. Yes, he would." And so the boy went off to get his boots and his satchel and his things to travel with. And the king wrote a letter in which he wrote, Dear Queen, when this boy arrives, please have him killed and buried immediately. Do it before I return. Yours, the King. And so the boy set off, pleased to have a job, pleased to be paid 2 gold pieces, and headed off for where the king's palace or castle was. Well, on the way he got lost, and then it was night time, and it was dark, and it was cold, and he was lost for quite a long time, even though he was lucky. And so he was really relieved eventually, and very tired, when he saw a little light, and he went towards the light, and it was a cottage, and he knocked on the door. And an old woman answered and said, "Ooh, what are you doing here in the middle of the night?" And the boy said, I'm taking a message to the Queen, but I've got lost, and I'm so tired. Could I stay here and sleep? And she said, "Ooh, this is a house of robbers. They're not here now, but like as not, when they come back, they might even kill you." "I am so tired," said the luck child, "and I am lucky. So I'll take my chances, please, if I might just lie down." And so she said, "Okay." And he lay down. Well, soon after, the robbers came home. And they said, "Who's this boy lying here?" And the grandmother said, "He's a young lad who was taking a message to the Queen, but he's got lost. He's just resting for the night." And they liked the look of him enough that they didn't do anything mean to him, and they looked in his satchel, though, to see what he was carrying, and found a letter. Well, it just happened that the robber king could read, and he read it, and it said, "Dear King, dear Queen, when this boy arrives, please have him killed and buried. Please have it done before I return. Yours, the King." And they said, "That's not a very nice message to give someone to carry themselves." And they ripped it up. And the robber king not only knew how to read, but he knew how to write. And so they all worked together to help him to write. "Dear Queen, when this fine young boy arrives, please marry him to our daughter immediately. Please have it done before I arrive. The King." Well, and so in the morning the boy got up, there was a new letter in his satchel, though he didn't know it, and they gave him some breakfast and they showed him the way, which was really quite easy from there on, and he arrived at the Queen's palace and presented his letter respectfully. The Queen read it and thought, well, how unusual, but she and the princess, her daughter, thought that he looked like a very fine young man, and so the wedding took place. And they were very happy together. When the king returned, he was really, really, really annoyed. And he said to the Queen, "How come you married him to our daughter? How come? I told you to kill him." Well, by good luck, the Queen still had the letter, so she showed it to him, and he read it and thought, how did this happen? And he asked the boy, and the boy said, "Well, I went to sleep in the robber's house, otherwise I know nothing." And the king thought, well, you have married my daughter by a trick. Now, you can't have it that easily. I need you to go over the mountains to the black mountain of the Dark King and bring me 3 golden hairs. He knew it was a terrible place to go to. He knew it was a very long way away, and he did not expect the boy to ever return. The princess cried, but the luck child said, "Have no fear. I am brave and valiant, and I want to be married to you, and I will be back." Off he went, and travelled for a few days, came to a town surrounded by a wall and a moat, and met a watchman leaning over going, "Who are you, and what's your trade? And what do you know?" He said, "I'm the luck child, and I know everything." "Oh, if that's the case," said the watchman, "tell us why the fountain in the middle of our town that used to flow sweet wine now won't even flow water." "Ah, I'll tell you on my way back," said the boy. And off he went again, another couple of days, and came to another town, where the watchman once again called out, "What's your trade, and what do you know?" And he said, "I know everything. Well, in that case, said the watchman, could you tell us why the apple tree in the centre of our town that used to bear beautiful apples now barely grows any leaves? I'll tell you that answer on my way back, said the boy. And on he went and came to a broad river. And one boat, a ferryman, with his oars, rowing people across. Well, there were no other people. There was only the boy. And he said, please take me to the other side, because I'm going to the Black Mountain where the Dark King lives. Okay, said the ferryman, but tell me, why is it? I think the ferryman might have asked him too, what's your trade and what do you know? And the boy said, I know everything. Well, then tell me, said the ferryman, why do I have to sit here year after year after year after year rowing people across the river? Why can't I get out? Because I think he felt stuck, he couldn't get out. And the boy said, I'll tell you on the way back. And out he hopped onto the other side. Well, it wasn't long before he came to the Black Mountain of the Dark King, who lived in a very grubby, dark, rather unsavory and slightly smelly a little bit maybe, cave. But he wasn't home. His grandmother was home, and she was a bit funny too, but she was nice enough. And she said, ooh, you don't want to be in here. This is where the Dark King lives, and he's not very nice. Ah, said the boy, but I need 3 golden hairs from his head. And the answers to 3 questions. Well, said the old woman, I'll turn you into an ant, and you can sit on the folds of my skirt, and we'll see what happens. Well, must have put her in a pocket, I think, because I think she stood up, because the Dark King came back and said, I can smell human flesh. Where is it? And started turning over the pots and pans and pulling out the cupboards and looking behind the chairs and making things very higgledy-piggledy. And the grandma said, stop it. I've just tidied up. Now, please, eat your dinner. You're always smelling things. Nothing here. And so he ate his dinner, and then he was tired and he lay down, his head on the old woman's lap, and the ant very close. And when the giant had fallen asleep, the old woman carefully took 1 golden hair and pulled it out and put it down where the ant was. Ah! What did he do? Why did he pull my hair out? Oh, did I? I think he was dreaming. I had this strange dream. Somebody wanted to know an answer to a riddle. What sort of riddle? Said the giant. Well, it was a town, and in it there was a fountain that used to flow sweet wine, and now doesn't even give water. They want to know why. Well, the giant said, that's easy. At the bottom of that well, there's a toad underneath a rock. If you take it out and kill it, the fountain will flow again. Now let me sleep. And he lay down. And the grandma waited till he was asleep. And when he was really asleep, she took 1 golden hair and pulled it out, put it down where the ant was. You did it again! Why did he do it again? I told you not to do it! Don't pull my hairs out when I didn't mean to pull your hair out. It must have been another dream. It's a very dream sort of filled night. What dream? I dreamt that there was a town in which an apple tree had been growing that gave the most splendid apples, and now were barely any leaves, let alone apples. And they didn't know why. Oh, that's easy, said the giant. There's a little mouse living at the bottom of the roots, and if they kill it and they're out, then it'll grow very well again. Oh, now please don't pull out any more hairs, or I shall box you round the head. I'll try not to, said the grandma. And she had to sing a lot of songs and sing a lot of stories because he found it hard to go back to sleep. But he did eventually go back to sleep. And of course, as soon as he was asleep, she pulled out another gold hair, put it down by the ant, and he woke up and he went, I told you not to pull out my hair. Oh my gosh, said the old woman. Did I do it again? I can't believe it. It was such a strange dream. I really couldn't make sense of it. I don't know. It was such a strange dream. It really got me wondering, and I guess my hands got wondering as well or something. Oh, what was the dream? Said the giant. What was the dream? Well, there was a ferryman who wondered why he could never ever get out of his own boat and stop ferrying people back and forth year after year after year. Oh, the man's a fool. All he has to do is put the oar in the hands of somebody else and then he'll be able to get out. And that person will be stuck. Now, don't touch my head. No, I won't. I'll try very hard, said the grandma. And indeed, she didn't pull out any more. And he went back to sleep. In the morning, he had breakfast and then he was gone. She turned the boy back into a boy, not an ant. He took the 3 golden hairs. He thanked her very warmly, gave her a hug, said, bye-bye, Grandma, thank you. And off he went. He ran. He got to the ferry boat. And the ferry boat said, oh, you're on your way back. What's the answer? Yeah, take me to the other side first, then I'll tell you. So he took him to the other side. And the ferryman said, so what's the answer? He said, the next person who wants to ride in your boat, give him the oar and then hop out. Okay, said the ferryman, thank you. He came to the next place he had stopped, which was the second town. And the watchman called out, hey, you're back. Did you get the answer? Yes, I did. The answer is that at the bottom of your tree that used to bear apples and now barely grows leaves, there's a little mouse gnawing away at the roots. If you get him out and kill him, then the apple tree will bear fruit again. Oh, that is great news, they all said. Listen, let's give you a reward. And they gave him 2 donkeys, each one laden with sacks of gold. And the boy said, thank you very much. And off he went with his 2 donkeys, his sacks of gold, and his 3 golden hairs. Well, he came to the next town and they called out, what's the answer? And he said, it's simple. Underneath your well, your fountain, there is a toad. You have to get him out and kill him, and then your fountain will flow sweet wine once again. That is wonderful, said the people. Let us reward you. And they gave him a donkey with 2 sacks of gold. So now he had 2 donkeys, 4 sacks of gold, and 3 golden hairs. And soon he was at home with his one lovely wife. The king was very disappointed to see him, but he was more excited about gold because he was a greedy man. He said, where did you get that gold? And the boy said, because he wasn't a fool, he said, well, I went past the town with the fountain, I went past the town with the apples, I came to a river, and I crossed with a ferryman, and on the other side, instead of sand on the shore, there was gold. You just help yourself. There's no end, no shortage of it. Well, said the king, and he got on his horse as fast as he could with a few spare sacks tied to the back of his saddle and galloped away. And finally arrived at the ferryman by the river and hopped into the boat and said, take me across to the other side, ferryman. And the ferryman said, yes, just hold the oar for a minute, would you? He said when they got to the other side, and out hopped that ferryman, and the king was stuck ferrying people across there year after year after year. And the ferryman was free. And the boy, the luck child, and his wife ruled very well in the king's absence. And it was a fine kingdom. And that is the story of the luck child, or the 3 golden hairs. And I don't have my blower, so I will go